Welcome back. This is the third part of the lecture on urbanization and refinement. And, excuse me, in this, I just want to briefly recap what we've talked about and say a little bit about the role that cities were destined to play during the imperial crisis and the lead up to the American Revolution. As we've seen, cities were hugely dynamic places. They were far more important than their small numbers would lead us to suggest. And not surprisingly, they were on the cutting edge of the resistance to parliamentary taxation, starting with the Sugar and Stamp Acts in 1764 and 1765. One of the questions I think to think about in connection with that is perhaps a comparative one to compare the unrest that had periodically beset cities, especially the anti-impressment riots of the 1740s and 50s during the wars with France, with the unrest of the 1760s. Although the destruction and crowd mobilization, especially in Boston's Knowles riot of 1748, was quite extensive, interestingly, those riots never panned out into a wider colonial resistance. They're localized, burned very brightly, but then died down and did little to disrupt the general feelings of allegiance that we've seen to Britain and to the idea, the patriotism that many British Americans felt toward the British Empire. By contrast, the cities came to stand in the 1760s and 1770s for the cause of America as a whole. And here we see a contemporary engraving from 1778 showing British troops and ships arriving in Boston. Engraved by Paul Revere, one of the great Patriot leaders. It commemorates a scene actually that had happened in September of 1768, so this is 2 years after the fact. But it's very clear that Boston in this case is standing in for the suffering of British America as a whole. And the cities that had oftentimes seemed like places apart, exotic, more diverse than the rural countryside, oftentimes wealthier, with tensions between port and hinterland being very striking. From the late 1760s onward, the cities came to stand in as being synonymous with America. And I think that's a question, thinking about how it is that happened, that's not a bad question to think about as we move forward. So, okay, well, I will allow time during class next Tuesday for questions about this. Obviously, if you've had questions during these three presentations, you haven't had a chance to ask about them. So I'll leave time for that, and we'll be talking about New England mainly, but certainly one of the readings by Jerry Daniels does talk about sort of the relationship between Portsmouth, which is the seat of power here in New Hampshire, and the outlying hinterland extending into the Connecticut Valley. And so some of the themes that we've talked about here will also come up in class next week. Okay, if your weekend is still ahead of you, I hope you have a good one. But whenever it is you're watching this, look forward to seeing you on Tuesday.